when I came to Atlanta, I felt I would meet Srila Prabhupada, and I was on the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party, and I felt when I joined ISKCON, I would meet Srila Prabhupada. But they told me, that's impossible, you're not going to meet Prabhupada. It's too many disciples now. But Tamal Krishna Maharaj arranged that every boy on the Radha Damodar party would personally meet Srila Prabhupada, which was very special. So what happened was, Srila Prabhupada was giving a darshan, and we were brought in one by one to meet Srila Prabhupada. So I went up to wait, I was expecting a very big long line, and there was a lot of devotees there, but nobody wanted to be first. And I thought, this is crazy, they don't want to be first? I want to be first. So I was first to go in to see Srila Prabhupada, and I went into the room was just white sheets, wall to wall. And Prabhupada was laying back on a pillow, and he was like very grave. And I gave Prabhupada a big smile as I walked in. And as soon as I smiled, Prabhupada looked at me, and he gave me a very big smile, a very big smile. And I was just really happy. And I had just learned Prabhupada's pranam mantra. But I hadn't really learned it, but I thought I had studied it. So we had to say it out loud for Srila Prabhupada because Prabhupada's there. So Prabhupada was sitting behind a little coffee table. And as I came up, I paid my obeisances to Prabhupada, and I started this Namo Vishnu Padai. And as soon as I started to say the mantra, I heard them introducing me to Srila Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna, Adi Keshava, Keshava Bharati, Dristadumna. They were all standing behind Srila Prabhupada. And they said, this is Bhakti Glenn. We picked him up in Miami. And then that was okay, but then I heard Prabhupada say, Glenn. And I thought, Prabhupada saying my name? It says, Namaste Saraswati Devam, and I can't remember then I heard Prabhupada say, Glenn. And I could see he did his thing with his hands, And then I just forgot the mantra. I could hardly say it. And I looked up at Prabhupada like this, and Prabhupada said, Glenn. He said my name 3 times. So I thought, he recognized me. Yeah, I was very shocked. So then I went to the back of the room, and then each boy came in one by one. And Prabhupada met them. And then Prabhupada started to talk to us. He said, you're all our gems, my gems. You're all my gems. Because he said, because you're 100% engaged in devotional service. You're all brahmacharis. And you're selling my books. And Srila Prabhupada said, thank you very much. He said, just do your level-headed best. And then I just felt great relief. Because that party was a lot of pressure. And the devotees really pushed us very hard. And it was like, the anxiety of the gopis is they're always sweeping the floors, even though there's no dust, just to please Krishna. It was like they had this, and it's like spiritual anxiety is spiritual. They had us really hepped up to sell Prabhupada's books. But when we met Prabhupada, Prabhupada said, just do your level-headed best. And that level-headed idea really sunk into me at the time. And I said, this isn't logical, it's spiritual. This is the truth. Prabhupada's only wanting our level-headed best. And then Prabhupada thanked us. And then one devotee, he asked Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, if we die on Sankirtan, will we go back home, back to Godhead? And Prabhupada said, whatever state the mind is at the time of death, that state you'll attain. So if you think of Krishna and you're on Sankirtan and you die, you go back to Godhead. If you don't, then maybe not. So, but then Prabhupada, he got the feeling everyone in the room just kind of went, they're kind of like, they didn't get the thing that they wanted. And then Prabhupada says, but I promise you this, if you distribute my books until your dying day, Lord Chaitanya will personally come and take you back home, back to Godhead. I said, I promise you this. And and then Prabhupada told us he wanted us all to be brahmacharis, never to marry. He said, if you all remain brahmachari, 90% chance of going back home, back to Godhead. He said, as soon as you get married, 50% chance. So the devotees, and then Prabhupada said, as soon as you marry, you must have an apartment. And once you get an apartment, you must put so many things inside. And if you're a brahmachari, you can sleep under a tree. He liked very much Panihati and the deities of Chaitanya and Nityananda Gaurnitai there. And he said, because the devotees cooperated so much together. And this has really made, and Prabhupada cried in appreciation for the cooperation of the devotees. The temple was filled with devotees, packed, and they were all devotees. All of Prabhupada's disciples. And then the next time I saw Srila Prabhupada was in Philadelphia at the Ratha Yatra. Prabhupada came and we went to the airport and saw Srila Prabhupada at the airport. And then we brought Prabhupada back and he started to give a class and he said, there are many levels of consciousness. He said, there's the consciousness of a dog, there's the consciousness of a plant, and then he looked at us and he said, in a consciousness like you. He said, but we're interested in Krishna consciousness. So so much, I was just beginning in the movement then. I only heard 1 or 2 classes, and the rest of the time I spent on the Ratha Yatra carts. Because after the Ratha Yatra, those carts had to be guarded, and I was a guard for the carts. And then, but Prabhupada said at that Ratha Yatra, it was cloudy, and it looked like it was going to rain. And I remember, as soon as Prabhupada got out of his car, it seemed like a beam of light from the clouds came down and hit Prabhupada and made everything bright. And then the clouds went away. And Prabhupada got onto the Ratha Yatra cart, and then we pulled Srila Prabhupada for, a couple of hours, Lord Jagannath and Prabhupada. And then behind the art museum, Srila Prabhupada told us the story of how Krishna took the form of Jagannath. He said, Krishna was walking through the halls in his palace in Dwarka one day, and he heard Rohini and Rukmini talking. And Rukmini said to Rohini, I heard Krishna sleeping last night. She said the name Radha, Radha, Radha. Who is Radha? And Rohini said, oh, Radha is very special. And Radha-Krishna relationship is very special. Let me tell you the story of Radha-Krishna's relationship. And as soon as she started to tell the story, Krishna started to listen. And as Krishna listened, he became stunned. And he took the form of Jagannath with the big eyes and the big smile, and probably this big smile. And he's stunned. So a little bit later, Subhadra came by, and she saw Krishna stunned in the hall, and she started to listen, and she became stunned. And she took the form of Subhadra, as we see in the deities. And Baladev the same way. And then Prabhupada gave this story that was I've always remembered this story, because there's another story, but this was a story that Prabhupada told us at Ratha Yatra. And then the next time I saw Srila Prabhupada was in Los Angeles. And that was very special, because this was the time when I saw Prabhupada in the most awe and reverential way. And it was, Ramaswar had prepared a very nice greeting for Srila Prabhupada. He said, like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and they went and bought all kinds of musical instruments from Hollywood, big long horns, and they put all kinds of fruits out and red carpet and everything to greet Prabhupada. But I didn't want to be down at the car. I wanted to be inside near the Vyasasan, because I figured if I was near the Vyasasan, when all the devotees came in, I'd be close to Prabhupada when he'd give the lecture. So Prabhupada came in, and I was waiting in the temple for Prabhupada to greet him as he came in the temple. And as he came in the Los Angeles temple, he came in, and as he walked under the balcony, all the Madhajis threw these gardenia petals. I mean, they had a huge amount of gardenia petals, which are, very opulent. And they threw so much that there was like a curtain of gardenia petals, and Prabhupada walked out of the curtain. Walked out of this curtain of gardenia petals, and I saw Srila Prabhupada, and my legs, they just went like rubber bands. And I fell to the ground. I didn't pay my obeisances, I fell to the ground. And then I paid my obeisances. Just this energy from Prabhupada, I just melted and fell to the ground. I really melted. And then Prabhupada gave his lecture. And then I remember while Prabhupada was here, what he said on the Vyasasana. One time he said, don't use this philosophy like a knife. He said, this philosophy is very strong. And you can use it like a knife. You can cut. You can cut with this. He said, do not use this philosophy like a knife. Another time Prabhupada said, jumping, 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 just like a monkey, over the head of your spiritual master. You'll all become monkeys in Vrindavan for deviating from the order of the spiritual master. And that Prabhupada said. And then another time, I remember sitting in sitting next, waiting for the Srimad Bhagavatam class to start, and this one boy had showed up, and he had stayed up all night, and he hadn't slept, and he wasn't in devotee dress. He said, is Prabhupada really going to give a class today? And I said, yes, he really is. He said, oh, I'm so excited. I couldn't sleep last night. I was afraid I wouldn't get up early enough. So this boy came in, and he said he wanted to see Srila Prabhupada, but he was afraid to go to sleep. So he didn't sleep all night, and he wanted to be there for Prabhupada's class. I said, well, just sit here. Prabhupada's going to give the class very soon. So Prabhupada came and gave the class. And as soon as Prabhupada sat on the Vyasasana, the boy fell asleep. And Prabhupada was giving the class, and he kept looking down at me and going like this, pointing me to wake up the boy. So I shook him. He wouldn't wake up. And I shook him again. He wouldn't wake up. So then I kept looking at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada just... And then later on, he would look at me again, and I'd shake him, and he wouldn't wake up. I shook that guy through the whole class. He didn't wake up until Prabhupada finished the class. Then he woke up. Then another time, all in this period, Prabhupada, I think it was in Los Angeles for 10 days, I was listening to the class, and it was right in the middle of the class, and Prabhupada was speaking a sentence, and I realized by the way he was forming the sentence that he was going to say something incorrectly, grammatically incorrect. And my mind said, just see, he's going to say something grammatically incorrect, and he's a perfect master. And then Prabhupada stopped. He didn't say the sentence. He looked right down at me, even though there's 300 people in a room. Looked right down at me. He looked back up. He said the whole sentence perfectly, and then he looked down at me and went like this. And I just melted into the floor, and I thought, that couldn't have just happened like I thought it happened. I can't believe, I hope he really didn't know what I was thinking. And I just prayed that Prabhupada really didn't know what I was thinking. But it was amazing, Then I thought, wow, Prabhupada is the perfect master. He really knows. So then he came to the doll studio, and he went through the doll studio, and he saw all the dolls, and he saw the changing body. And then he saw the changing body, and he said, from boyhood to youth to old age, the body changes, but the soul remains the same. He said, this is not a Hindu problem. It's not a Muslim problem or a Christian problem. This is a universal problem. So this Krishna consciousness movement will stop that. Will stop this death business. He said, so this is a non-sectarian, not a religion. This is how to stop this birth, death, disease, old age problem. And Prabhupada told us certain things. He went and we showed him his murti that Lochan Prabhu had made. And then the head moved, and Prabhupada, he liked very much. And then Prabhupada said, I will always be with you. And I will sit on the Vyasasana, and I'll always be there in my form on the Vyasasana. I will never leave. Now that you've done this, I will never leave. I will always be there. So Prabhupada told us, this form is him, and he will be there. And then Prabhupada saw these Gandharvas, and he said, what is this? And we said, these are Gandharvas. And Prabhupada says, Gandharvas don't have wings. He said, only Garuda has wings. Of this, he is unique. So we thought, oh, angels don't have wings. So anyway, that's the way it was with Srila Prabhupada. You would learn things that you thought were some way, and Prabhupada said, no, they're not like this. The next time I saw Srila Prabhupada was in Bombay. And this was not, my problem about my association with Srila Prabhupada is that the longest association I had was the last 2 weeks of Srila Prabhupada's time with us on this planet. So some of it is a little heart-rendering because those are bittersweet moments. And I didn't say so many things because I kept them within myself. But Prabhupada, when we first came to Bombay, the day I arrived in Bombay, there was a day that Srila Prabhupada was going to go to Vrindavan. So Srila Prabhupada was in his rooms that were not completely finished in the right wing of the Bombay guest house. And the devotees were saying, you should prepare yourself because Prabhupada is not the way he was, And I understood Prabhupada had been sick, but I had no way to prepare myself for the way I saw Srila Prabhupada. From the time I saw him in Los Angeles, he was so beautiful and so full of beautiful health. And then from May of 76 to September of 77, Srila Prabhupada looked like the fasting Buddha. He was like no flesh, just bones and skin. And when Prabhupada came down they brought Prabhupada down in a wheelchair, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was wheeling Prabhupada out. We had a very nice, joyous kirtan until the doors opened and we saw Prabhupada. And then the kirtan became almost crying kirtan. And we took Prabhupada out, and it was a great effort and seeming Srila Prabhupada a lot of pain to move Prabhupada from that chair to put him into the car. It seemed to take quite a long time, and the devotees were going through great psychological pain to see Prabhupada in such a position. And I remember as they put Prabhupada in and they were getting ready to go, Prabhupada wanted to give us pranams, but it took Prabhupada like 45 seconds, a minute just to go like this. But he struggled to say goodbye to us like this. And then I followed his car along the Juhu Road because I had just come, and then Prabhupada was leaving. And I ran behind the car, and I could see Prabhupada's head, and the car's going slow along the traffic of the cows and the people. And so I was able to keep up, but then when we got down to the end of the road, it started to speed up, and then I was just left there. And feeling very vacant. And I go back to the temple, and all the devotees want to leave their service, and they want to go to Vrindavan. And Tamal Krishna, and Gopal Krishna, at that time, he was Grihastha. He was going around and trying to get everyone to stay in their service and not go to Vrindavan, because the whole temple wanted to leave. So then we went on Sankirtan to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books with the BBT Library Party. And Mother Palika, she told us, if Prabhupada gets worse, we'll let you know, and then you can go to Vrindavan from Sankirtan. So for the whole month of October, we were in Gujarat going to libraries, selling Prabhupada's books. And it was a very blissful service. We sold whole sets of Prabhupada's books. When we sold a set, we would give them 3 books. We had a whole van full of books, and very soon we had no books. So we sold many, many, many sets, like 80 volumes of Prabhupada's books. It was a wonderful service. And then one day, Mathura, he said, Pita, he was always asking me, Pita, let's go hear this person play the sitar. Let's go to this person and take prasad with them. And he said, let's go to see Hanuman. And there was a Hanuman temple. I said, Pita, let's go see Hanuman. So we had finished the Sankirtan for the day. So I said, okay, Mathura, we'll go to see Hanumanji. So we went into the temple, and there was an old sadhu, and he was sitting on the railing of the temple, and he said, you're the disciples of Prabhupada? He said, your Guru Maharaj is getting ready to leave the planet. What are you doing here? And he looked at us like we were insane. And we just stopped. He said, you should go right now to be with Prabhupada. Go now. And then we just left. We didn't even see Hanuman. We went and told the other devotees what happened. And to my surprise, all the devotees decided to leave Sankirtan, except for 2. Bhima and Brishringa Prabhu, who's now Narasingha Swami. They stayed with the books, and then we took the van and we went to Vrindavan. When we arrived in Vrindavan the next morning, we drove all night long. We were very dusty from the trip. We arrived, and then Bhavananda said, "Oh, please come. Come right now. Come in to see Prabhupada." Now, what I didn't know is that Nisringa Chaitanya Prabhu had been telegramming Srila Prabhupada our book scores. And this Prabhupada loved. Every day they would telegram Prabhupada how many sets of books. And Bhavananda said, "Prabhupada, he really liked this, you know." So we went into the room, and we had heard also that Prabhupada's health was getting better and that he was preparing to go from Vrindavan to Mayapur. That was the rumor. So I had some feeling maybe Prabhupada was better now than in Bombay. So when I went into the room, I saw some person sitting in a rocking chair who I said, "This is Srila Prabhupada." So I bowed down to the person in the rocking chair, and I also said the pranam mantras out loud like the first time I met Prabhupada. And then I got up, and then my eyes adjusted to the room because it had made the room very dark because it was a very bright India day. And I saw it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj in the chair. And there was a bed, and Srila Prabhupada was in the bed, and he was kind of like sunken into the bed. And I was like, very sunk, and it was like, and then all the devotees, they looked at me sympathetically. And then I was a bit embarrassed, and I just sat down really quiet. And we all sat like little eggs around Prabhupada's bed and didn't say anything. And then we didn't say anything, and then we would just wait for Prabhupada to speak. And sometimes there would be kirtan going on, or we would chant japa. And we just were allowed to stay in the room. Prabhupada let us stay in the room as long as we wanted, every day. We could be with Prabhupada. And that day I remember sitting there, the first day, Prabhupada was talking about his godbrother, Srila Bhakti Vilastirtha Maharaj. He had just passed away. This was in November. He passed away, I think, in September of that year. And Prabhupada said, "I have always feared this hospitalization," he said, and then he talked about how his godbrother had left his body in the hospital. And he said, "How much a horrible death this must have been, all these tubes coming out," Prabhupada said, "with all the tubes coming out." He said, "I've always feared this." He said, "And I'm so happy that I'm here with you in Vrindavan and not in the hospital." And then he said, like this. And then Bhavananda said, "Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Vilastirtha Maharaj, what was his fate, Srila Prabhupada? He was so envious of you. What did he do? What was his fate?" And Prabhupada said, "Back home, back to Godhead." And Bhavananda said, "But Prabhupada, he was so envious of you and did so many things bad against you." Prabhupada said, "Those seemingly indifferences are insignificant in comparison to the service that he performed for his Guru Maharaj." He said, "He served his Guru Maharaj his entire life, and now my Guru Maharaj is taking him back home, back to Godhead." So that, I remember, was the strongest message of that day. And then our service became that we would go to Srila Prabhupada's room every day, and I was there for the last 2 weeks, from November 1st to November 14th, when Prabhupada finally went back to Krishna. Entered Radha Krishna Nitya Leela, as Ban Maharaj told us. Srila Prabhupada's now preparing to enter Radha Krishna Nitya Leela. So on the 14th of November, Srila Prabhupada entered the eternal pastimes of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. Again, re-entered. And our service was to chant Hare Krishna in his room and to sometimes have kirtan. So sometimes there were many devotees in the room, and sometimes there were just a few. But I remember one time, it was just myself and Prithu Prabhu. And we had this little pinky symbols, and we would chant Hare Krishna like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. We couldn't chant it much louder. So after a while, it's just you and another Prabhu. Maybe it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was starting to get a little tired, and I started to see that I'm falling asleep, and I check myself. I said, wake up. It's just you and this other Prabhu and Prabhupada, and you're chanting for Prabhupada. This is real. Wake up. Now chant nicely for Prabhupada. Say it clearly. Try to say it nice. I didn't chant 3 mantras before Srila Prabhupada said, who is that chanting? He stopped talking. He said, who is that chanting? They said, Prabhupada, it's Prithu and another devotee. They went over and they said, Prabhu, Prabhupada wants to know your name. And I said, my name's Pita Das. Then they went back and Prabhupada said, it's Pita Das and Prithu. Prabhupada says, oh, nice chanting. Continue. So that was like my big, wow. So Prabhupada was so sensitive to everything within the room. Every little sound and our feelings and our emotions, Prabhupada knew it was there. He was very coherent. Actually, I think Prabhupada's state of being was even more magnified than it was when I saw him in Los Angeles. But his body was destroyed. But his consciousness was very alert. Everything he would comment. And he would comment about the birds, the atmosphere of Vrindavan. And when he'd hear the artik going on in the temple, he'd hear the artik and he'd say, this is the perfection of human life, to be a pujari. He said, this is the highest service that one can perform as a human being, to be a pujari. And then he said, because with a material body, you're serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You're waking him up, you're bathing him, you're dressing him, you're feeding him. These are the actual activities that we are doing in the spiritual world. But in this world, you're doing this actions. He said, so this is the perfection of human life. There's nothing higher than you can be, but to be a pujari. So then I had always heard from my god brothers that, distributing books was the highest service, which is a very elevated service. But Prabhupada was saying, on the absolute platform, the highest service is to serve Krishna eternally. And this is a way to actually serve Krishna eternally. So if you're a pujari, you've attained your constitutional position, even within a bounded samsara, even within, you're liberated. He's probably saying this person is liberated. So I remember another time, one devotee came in, I think it was Chit Sukhananda Prabhu. He came in and he said that he had just arrived in Vrindavan. Any new devotees come, every morning Prabhupada would say, have any new devotees come? And then he'd say, why are they leaving? And when they come, why do they leave? Every day Prabhupada would say, new devotees come? And when they come, why do they leave? And then I remember him saying, why did Bhagavan leave? And I remember him specifically saying for Bhagavan, why did Bhagavan leave? I want him to be here now. And so Chit Sukhananda came, and Prabhupada immediately said, how is your wife? And later, Chit Sukhananda told me, Prabhupada always asks me how my wife is, because he knows we always fight. And then he said, oh, my wife's fine. He said, but my room in the guest house, it's right over these devotees, and they're chanting that Nitai Gaur Radhe Shyam, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram mantra all the time, Prabhupada, and it's very agitating. I don't like to hear that. And Prabhupada says, I will give you a mantra to counteract. I will give you a mantra. I will correct this mantra. And then Prabhupada said, Nitai Gaur Radhe Shyam, Jai Krishna Balaram. And then Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada had corrected the mantra and glorified Shri Krishna Balaram, and we were all in Krishna Balaram Mandir. And then Prabhupada said, we can chant that in our temples, but I have yet hear anyone chant. But that Prabhupada actually made this mantra. I heard Prabhupada say. And then Prabhupada's position, after you were with Prabhupada for a while, you got used to Prabhupada's physical condition that was so devastating when you first saw. So we would be around Prabhupada's bed, and then new devotees would come in, and as they first saw Srila Prabhupada, they'd start crying, and it would be so pathetic that we'd all start crying. The Swedish devotees crying when they first saw Srila Prabhupada. So we'd all started crying. And then Prabhupada said, at one point he says, why are you all crying? So he said, Srila Prabhupada, we're crying because you're so sick and we are afraid that you may leave. And Prabhupada said, I will never leave you. He said, I live forever in my books. I will never leave you. I'll live forever within my books, so there's no reason to cry. He said, old people cry, old people die, that is natural. He said, when a young person dies, that's some mistake, because young person should live to their old. When they're old, they should die. And that's, for me, it's natural. It's a natural thing, so don't cry. So then one devotee said, but Srila Prabhupada, we're crying because we can't be without you. And when you leave, we won't know how to communicate with you. And Prabhupada says, oh, I will communicate with you through your heart. He said, I will come to you in your dreams as Chaitya Guru. I will communicate with you through dreams, Prabhupada said, as Chaitya Guru. I also found that a little controversial because I thought my godbrothers wouldn't have approved, but Prabhupada had said it. Prabhupada said it right there, that he would communicate with us through dreams. And then at times Prabhupada would say, your mothers are all very good. You all have very good mothers. He said, yes, all you boys have very good mothers. And we go, but our mothers, they're meat eaters. And Prabhupada said, because the qualities of the son, they come from the mother. He said, so you're all such good devotees, so I know you have such good mothers. And Prabhupada would compliment us. And Prabhupada said, my Guru Maharaj, he left his body out of disgust for his disciples, not following his order. He was disgusted. So he left out of disgust. He said, but I'm not disgusted with you. I'm very satisfied with you. Never think that I'm not happy with you, Prabhupada said. I'm very pleased with my disciples. Prabhupada said this, and he said, and I'm very happy to have your association. You're very good association. Really? But, that's because Prabhupada had trained us in such a way to, in Krishna consciousness, and he was seeing us as good association. I remember one point, Krishnadas Babaji had come in. He was a great devotee. A Kinchana Krishnadas Babaji, Prabhupada's godbrother, always jovial and laughing. He came in, and Prabhupada would speak Bengali with him a lot of the time. But I remember when he first came in, Prabhupada said to him, Babaji Maharaj, just look at my disciples. See how advanced they are. See how much they love me so much. See how attentive they are to me. And every word, they're just there to listen. Every word I say, they're just listening to every word. They're so obedient, and they're so devoted to me. See how advanced they are. And then Babaji Maharaj said, yeah, they are advanced. And I'm just thinking, well, I couldn't understand advanced. Then later, for many years, these things that happened in Prabhupada's room, I would remember them in my head, and I would say, in different sections, I would remember this and that part. And then I kept remembering that part. Prabhupada said we were advanced, but these were two Paramahamsas, and I'm so full of material desires. My mind was just filled with all kinds of nonsense in those days, and even worse than now, But Prabhupada was saying we were advanced, and I couldn't understand. But then I remember, Prabhupada said, why were they advanced? They are so attentive to me. They love me so much. They're so devoted to me. They want to please me so much. They're listening to every one of the words that I say. So then I realized, that's advanced devotee. Advanced devotee is the one who's the most attentive to Srila Prabhupada, who's so devoted to Prabhupada, who listens to his every word. This is advanced devotee. This, to me, is what Prabhupada was teaching me, and teaching us all. But to me, that's what it meant, and it took me many years to understand this. Many years. Then another time, Srila Prabhupada, at one time when lots of devotees were there, especially the people that Prabhupada called Ridvik Acharyas, transparent to the previous Acharya. I never heard Prabhupada refer to the 11 that he was going to ask to initiate as gurus, but Prabhupada called them Ridvik Acharyas, transparent to the previous Acharya. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. Now, these devotees who say this or that thing, one's like a right and left now. There's a right group, there's a right wing devotees and there's left wing devotees. But Srila Prabhupada called it Ridvik Acharya, transparent to the previous Acharya. And he said, he would often say, he would talk about this to the devotees, to Goswami Maharaj, to Bhavananda, to Sasarup. He would, very long time about what he wanted them to do, how to initiate, how to carry on. And it was everyone's understanding that those disciples would be their disciples. And I was very surprised to see in that letter, that July 9th or 7th letter, that Prabhupada was going to be, they were going to enter Prabhupada's book, of disciples, because Prabhupada was, it seemed while I was in the room that the new people were going to be the Marga brothers' disciples, and Srila Prabhupada would be grandfather guru. He even said that word. He would be grandfather guru. And there was recordings going on all the time. As soon as Prabhupada spoke, they would turn the recorder on, and then they turn it off. It's not that Prabhupada spoke like he did in good health. Prabhupada was mostly just sitting there quietly, almost sleeping, it would appear, resting. But as soon as Prabhupada would speak, the recorder was right by his head, and they just hit the on switch. So that's why when you hear those tapes, it's clicking on and off. So Srila Prabhupada, at one point, he had all the devotees in the room. Bhavananda was there. I remember Giriraj Maharaj had come in from Nepal, I think. Jayapataka Maharaj was there. Sasarup Maharaj was there. Jayadvaita Maharaj was there. He was a brahmachari. Panchadavidam, who's now Janardhan Maharaj with Govinda Maharaj's group, and Sridhar Maharaj's his mat, and they were all there. And Prabhupada said at one point, he said, "Of my disciples, I see no one who has my qualities." And then he said, "But if I look at this or that one, some qualities I see. And if I look at a group of them, some percentage of my qualities are certainly there." He said, "So I think that this movement I have some hope that this movement can continue on." He said, "And so the test of your love for me will be shown and how well you work together." And this I felt was like Prabhupada saying that no one person was going to be, but the GBC was that group of devotees. Together, we would have a percentage of Srila Prabhupada's qualities. even the GBC together, only a percentage of Srila Prabhupada's qualities. This I heard from Prabhupada himself. So within the GBC, we have a percentage of the qualities of Srila Prabhupada. So we have some hope that this society will go on. And we see for 30 years, it has gone on. And it will go on. So then Prabhupada said of his sannyas disciples that he had given sannyas to, he said that if they fall down after he leaves, they can never be given sannyas again. He said, if you do, their fall down will go on forever. He said, so if a sannyasi falls down, they can never be given back. He said, only I can do this. Prabhupada said, only I can reinstate them. You cannot reinstate. So this was an order Prabhupada gave. And then Srila Prabhupada said that, I think all this happened in the same day, as the order that I'm saying it. Then Prabhupada said that he wanted $1 million put in a fixed account. He said, I want $1 million put in a fixed account, and I want that money never to be withdrawn, and the interest on this money will go to renovate the holy places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, those that are Gupta and Lupta, those that are covered or lost. We want them revealed and brought back. So then they said, Srila Prabhupada, which ones? The ones in Bengal, the ones in Bangladesh, or the ones in Orissa? Which ones first? Prabhupada said, the ones in Bengal first. He said, but before that, before we do any of this renovation of these holy places, I want that my godbrother's mat, Sridhar Maharaj, I want my godbrother Sridhar Maharaj's mat finished. He said, because he's worked his whole life to establish this mat, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati mat. He said, I want this finished because before he dies, I said, I want him to see this. So before we start renovating these holy places, that money should go to him first. Srila Prabhupada, at that time, although he was 80-something years old, he didn't allow his female disciples to come into the room because he didn't want criticism of sannyas ashram. Even though Srila Prabhupada's body was completely devastated, and he was 82 years old, he still followed very strict, and he was a Paramahamsa devotee. He still followed very strict rules of sannyas and said his female disciples could stand at the window near his bed and hear him, but not come into the room. He would not allow them into the room. And we were allowed into the room. You know, so that's how strict Srila Prabhupada was, or is. That's his standard. He is the Acharya. You know, so we followed this Acharya. This is how he presented. Then another time I remember in the room, Srila Prabhupada would talk about his godbrothers, and he said, I am the only son of my Guru Maharaj. He said, I'm the only son. He said, the son inherits the business of the father. And he said, and I'm the only, of my godbrothers, I'm the only one who has inherited the business of my father. He said, the rest of my godbrothers are all like daughters, because the daughters stay within the house of the spiritual master, of the father. They don't get the business. They stay within the father's house. So they're all daughters. He said, but Prabhupada only had one son. My Guru Maharaj only had one son, and that is me. He said, so I'm the only son of my Guru Maharaj. All my godbrothers are daughters. And then he said, the Gaudiya Math deviated so much from my spiritual master, from our spiritual master. He said, but, he said, they're still the best representatives of Lord Chaitanya on this planet, next to me. So next to Srila Prabhupada, they were the best. He said, first is Prabhupada, then it's the Gaudiya Math. That's how Prabhupada saw it. And then I remember Ban Maharaj, when I went around with Dwarkesh, we saw Ban Maharaj, and we went We didn't know it was Bon Maharaj's temple. We just thought it was a temple. We went inside, and Bon Maharaj was in there, and he said, oh, how, and then we realized it's Prabhupada's God brothers, and then Bon Maharaj was there, and that's how I first met Bon Maharaj, and then he asked us how Srila Prabhupada was, and we told him Prabhupada was, situation, and then he came to see Srila Prabhupada, and then he came with Narayan Maharaj to see Srila Prabhupada, and they came into Srila Prabhupada's room, and I remember at first they spoke in English, and then later they started to speak in Hindi, and when they spoke in Hindi, I left because I felt Prabhupada speaking Hindi with them, he didn't want me in the room. But when he started to speak in Hindi to them, I realized I didn't think Prabhupada wanted me in the room, so I left. But when he spoke in English to them, Prabhupada said, he asked for their forgiveness. He says, I ask you for your forgiveness, he said, because in preaching, sometimes you have to point out the faults of others as examples for your disciples. He said, so I have had to criticize you in so many different ways because I'm an acharya. I'm the acharya, and I have to criticize like this as examples to my disciples. He said, and if I've offended you, I'm very sorry. I am sorry I haven't offended you. And immediately, Narayan Maharaj said, you can never offend. You're our guru. And then they started to speak Hindi, and then I left the room. And then when I came, I stayed outside until I saw them leave, and then I saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj taking Bon Maharaj to the gate. And then I went up and listened to them. In those days, you could just walk up and listen to these intimate older devotees speaking. And I just walked up and listened. And Bon Maharaj looked at us both, and he says, do not hate Krishna, because Prabhupada, because he may take Prabhupada. Prabhupada is about to enter Radha Krishna Nitya Leela. And I thought, why would we hate Krishna for this? I didn't think that it couldn't enter my brain to hate Krishna for this. Of course, I didn't want Prabhupada to leave us. So anyway, that's what he said. That was his instructions. And then we went into the see Prabhupada again, and then Prabhupada wanted to talk about his Samadhi. He said that where it should be. He wanted the place where it was going to be. And he said that he wanted to be buried in salt. He said that his Guru Maharaj had been buried in rock salt, and that bugs will never attack the body. The body will remain for hundreds and hundreds of years, and bugs and insects will never attack the body. So he said that when he explained how to do and he said the details for the Samadhi you can go to Narayan Maharaj. He will conduct this ceremony. And then he said after the Samadhi, 2 weeks later, after he's placed in the Samadhi, 2 weeks later, there will be a festival in which he'll invite all of his godbrothers to come and speak. And Bhavananda said, but Prabhupada, Bon Maharaj, do you want him to speak? Prabhupada says, yes, of course, I want him to speak. And Bhavananda said, but Prabhupada, Bon Maharaj, he'll certainly say something bad, Prabhupada. So I don't think we should let him speak. Are you sure you want him to speak, Prabhupada? Prabhupada said, let him speak. So I remember after Srila Prabhupada's placed in the ground, his body placed in the Samadhi, Bon Maharaj did come and he did speak, and he only spoke in Hindi. And because I heard Prabhupada say that, I asked this Indian devotee to translate what he was saying. And Bon Maharaj said, personally, I never preached to hippies. I only preached to the intellectual class of men. And he said, but when you preach to Westerners, along with that comes money. And then he pointed towards the temple. So he pointed towards our temple. So that's how it was translated to me by this devotee. So Srila Prabhupada, they had their competitions, seemingly insignificant differences, but that are insignificant comparison in comparison to the service that they were performing their spiritual master. So sometimes we see these insignificant differences between God brothers. They have their opinions, but their service to the spiritual master, which they've dedicated their whole life for, this burns up these seemingly insignificant differences. This I learned from Prabhupada at this time. Then another time, Srila Prabhupada said, he said that he wanted to go to Govardhana. It was getting time for the Govardhana Puja, and he said, we can go to Govardhana for Govardhana Puja. He said, we go there and we can sleep outside under the trees. And we don't even have to bring prasadam. The residents will feed us. And he said, they'll provide everything. We just sleep under the trees. We can just go and live we just all move down to Govardhana. He was encouraging like this. And then he said, what's the best way to go? And then he said, sannyas means, real sannyas is you get on an ox cart and you preach village to village. This is what a real sannyasi is. This is what real sannyasi. You have nothing. All you have is an ox cart and you go village to village. You never stop. This is real sannyas. He said, so I want an ox cart brought and I want to go to Govardhana on this ox cart. And then the Kaviraj said, oh, no. Before the Kaviraj told us, he said, Srila Prabhupada's always feeling the pain of fire. What? He said, Prabhupada's feelings. He must always be feeling the pain of fire. He told us this at the entrance to Srila Prabhupada's room from the guest house. He said, because there's no flesh on Prabhupada's body. He said that Prabhupada's body is just bones, and that all the nerves are laying on the bones. He said that feeling has to be just like fire. He said he's always feeling the pain of fire, but he never complains. He said this isn't a human being, this is a demigod. He said, and he said, sometimes I check his heartbeat. He would go in and check Srila Prabhupada's heartbeat, and he'd say, sometimes it's perfect, it's normal. He said, Prabhupada, it's normal. He said, sometimes I check it, and there's no heartbeat. Sometimes I check, and it's normal. Sometimes I check, and there's just this faint heart. He said, Prabhupada, you're controlling your heart. I didn't say anything. So this time he said, Prabhupada, if you want to go to Govardhana, then you should call for some flower airplane. And that's the only way you go to Govardhana. You can't go on some ox cart. You can't go. I cannot say, I will not recommend this. Only by flower airplane you can go. But this time, this Kaviraj had convinced Prabhupada's divinity. And like most Indian people, they want to see some magic, So they wanted to see Prabhupada do some miracle. The miracle was that Prabhupada was still in his body. That was the miracle. Because anybody else would have been dead 6 months before. Prabhupada later, I think Bhakti Charu went to Jagannath Puri and he did there's some oracle there, and they did an oracle reading on Srila Prabhupada, and they said Prabhupada left in the Bhishma, like Bhishma. Bhishma Dev, he was left on a bed of arrows upon the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and he maintained his body, his life within his body, so that he would leave just at the most auspicious moment. So this oracle said that Prabhupada left in the same way, like Bhishma, and it was true. I mean, it was true, and they always say, you want to know Srila Prabhupada's mystic power? We saw it. Prabhupada really, it was amazing that he was able, and he was still translating his books until the last moment. Every day, Jayadvaita Maharaj would come in around 11 o'clock, and he would translate, he would hold the microphone, and he would read the verse to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would translate the 10th canto. And it was amazing what Prabhupada was doing. He just had a complete schedule, but from his bed in a very low volume. So Prabhupada wanted to go to Govardhana. So he said, I want to go to Govardhana, and everyone's saying, Srila Prabhupada, we don't think this is a good idea, And Prabhupada said, in this room, it's like being killed by Ravana. He said, Marichi, he said, he was given the choice to be, if he didn't become a deer and go and tempt Ram away from Sita, Ravana would kill him. And if he became a deer, Ram would kill him. So he told Ravana, better to be killed by Ram. So Prabhupada says, better to be killed by Ram, better to go to Govardhana. If I stay in this room, it's like being killed by Ravana. So, but Prabhupada, you can't go. You know, the doctor said, Prabhupada, you won't even make it to the gate. If we carry you, you won't even make it to the gate. So there was a big discussion right around Prabhupada's bed, and Prabhupada said, you have to do this outside. I cannot, you know, it's too exhausting to hear this going on. It went on for maybe 15 minutes, discussion right in front of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, go outside. So they went into Prabhupada's garden, and they had a big discussion. I was just talking to Bhartraj about this. Went on and on and on. It seemed, I only remember, one person on Prabhupada's side and everybody against Prabhupada, and I was on the side against. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj seemed to be the one who was on the side not to take Prabhupada to Govardhana, and Hamsadutta was the only one, and Lokanath, who went to get the cart, were on Prabhupada's side to take him to Govardhana. So this went on and on and on until the cart came to the Krishna Balaram gate. Then we hear, the cart's here. Now it's time to move Prabhupada from the bed to the cart. And it's night. It's getting dusk. I mean, not only are we going to put Prabhupada on the cart, which is probably going to kill him, but it's going to be at night. So it'd even be worse, you know. So Prabhupada would want to go, no one would see, it would be at night, he would go and he would leave his body somewhere, and you know, this is what we feared. So we all went in myself included, we all went around Srila Prabhupada's bed and we said, Srila Prabhupada, please don't make us put you on this cart. Please don't make us put you on this cart. And Prabhupada said, he didn't say anything, and then we begged him, and we were almost crying. We were crying. And then Prabhupada said, if it worries you so much, I don't need to go. And it's just like the whole anxiety level just went from a 50,000 to back to zero, you know. And then everyone just, it was just like, oh, now we can relax. And then people started moving out of Prabhupada's room, you know. And it seemed like most of the people were out of the room. There weren't many people in the room. But I was still there, and I don't think there were many other people in the room. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I'll tell you this, I worked with him after Srila Prabhupada left for 7 years. You know, Siddhanta, how much I worked with him, how close I was with him. And why I worked with him was because I was so impressed at the excellent service that he gave Srila Prabhupada. You know, if you had everyone, even people who didn't like Tamal Krishna Maharaj, they saw how he served Prabhupada, and we were impressed that no one could have served him like this. You know, so, but because Goswami Maharaj was also very intimate to Prabhupada, he got very fried at this situation. And he went up to Prabhupada and he said, you know, Prabhupada, we can't understand why you do this. Why you insist for us to take you to Govardhana. We get so upset, we so worked up, and we just get this cart, and we bring it over here, and then we're so worried, we put you on the cart, you're going to die, we get flipped out, and we then become more protective of you, even more than before, and I just can't take it, Prabhupada. Why you do this? And he almost screamed at Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, it's my duty. Goswami said, what? He said, it's my duty to make you love me more. And Goswami said, oh. He walked away. And I just remember Prabhupada saying that, to make you love me more. And whatever love I had for Prabhupada just multiplied like 1,000 times. You know, he probably just made you love him so much. If you were with Prabhupada, whatever love you had for Prabhupada, he just increased it, and you just become more and more loving with him. His duty, he said, was to make us love him more. What wonderful duty. We already love Prabhupada, but he's getting us to love him more. After that period of time, I was in Swarup Damodar Maharaj came towards the last few days with Srila Prabhupada. Swarup Damodar Maharaj came. And every time Swarup Damodar Maharaj would come into the room, Srila Prabhupada would start talking about a life comes from life, every time. And he would say, this book, The Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness that Swarup Damodar wrote, Prabhupada was very, very proud of Swarup Damodar for this book. And he said, my disciple, Dr. Singh, PhD, Swarup Damodar, has written this wonderful book. Anyway, he was talking about life comes from life and not through chemicals. And he would talk about how the lemon tree produces citric acid, which is a chemical, but it came from life. So life comes from life, not by a combination of chemicals. So Prabhupada would just keep going through these same things with Swarup Damodar again and again. And this was even though Prabhupada was so ill, he still did this, you know. So Prabhupada had a very close relationship with Swarup Damodar. So I figured that's why Prabhupada named him Swarup Damodar, because Swarup Damodar had a very, very intimate relationship with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he saw Swarup Damodar was immediately like close son. I was like adopted son. Swarup Damodar was like real son. So I was adopted son, but still, one day, I remember I was in the room and Swarup Damodar was taking care of Prabhupada. And somehow it happened that it was just me and Swarup Damodar in the room. And this was the first time there had been that few people in the room. And I realized that if Swarup Damodar left the room, if Prabhupada wanted something, it would be me to get it, you know. So as soon as I had that understanding, immediately Prabhupada asked for something and Swarup Damodar left. And I went, I can't believe this is happening. And then I'm in the room, and I was like far away from the bed. I wasn't close. I was far away because it was just me. You know, I didn't get close at this time. I only got close when there was many people. But when it's just me, I stayed far away from the bed. So Prabhupada started calling for something. So I thought, you know, I need to go and ask what he wants. So I went over to the bed and I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada? What would you like, Srila Prabhupada? And Prabhupada said, cotton swab. Yeah, cotton swab. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. So I went behind the bed, and there's this coffee table. He had all kind of medicines and salves and Vicks Vapor Rub and all kinds of things like this. And I was looking, where are the cotton swabs? Where are the cotton swabs? I just saw some cotton ball. I didn't see cotton swab. I couldn't believe it. This is, you know, my service is always cursed. I can't get even a cotton swab right, you know. So I found the cotton ball, and I put it in my hand, and I start rubbing it and holding it, and I'm thinking, I want, Krishna, if you could turn this into a cotton swab, I really won't tell anybody. I'll just give it to Prabhupada, and that'll be it. I won't be that I'm going to say this for the rest of my life. I knew it was impossible, but I thought, I'm going to take it over to Prabhupada anyway. And I took the cotton ball over to Srila Prabhupada. I said, here, Srila Prabhupada. And he took it out of my hand like this, and he put it in his ear with his pinky. And back this. And then this went over to the back of the wall. And I knew that's not what Prabhupada wanted, but I wanted to do some service, and Prabhupada immediately accepted. He knew I loved him, and he knew I wanted to serve him. And he knew this was my last chance, and he took it. Put it in his ear. And then Swarup Damodar came in with the cotton swabs, and he started to clean Prabhupada's ear, and I started to get the shakes, and I started getting weak. And if I had the cotton swabs and I went up to Prabhupada and he wanted me to clean his ear, I thought, that's why I say he's the son and I'm the adopted son. So, it was very intimate. Then Prabhupada, there was this one Bhagaji, I remember one day he came into the room and he said, I remember he was, I didn't know who he was at first. I didn't know what his relationship to Srila Prabhupada was. He had helped acquire the land, Krishna Balaram temple, and he was very close to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada actually wanted him to take sannyas, and they had a very close relationship. And he came in, and he said to Srila Prabhupada one day, he said, Prabhupada, why are you sick? And Prabhupada said, because of the sins of my disciples, that's why I'm sick. And then Bhagaji said, but Prabhupada, they're always chanting Hare Krishna, so they have no sin. Prabhupada said, yes. He didn't say. Then Prabhupada, towards the last day, the day before he went into Samadhi, he said to us, he said, I don't have any faith that this body is ever going to become well again. He said, this body is unfit for devotional service. He said, I don't want to stay in this body anymore. So before this, I don't want to get ahead of myself here a little bit. The night before this, Sarup Damodar, I talked about Sarup Damodar, and I got ahead of myself. Sarup Damodar was talking to Srila Prabhupada the night before Prabhupada went into Mahasamadhi. It was like before 9 p.m. It was like 7 to 9 or something. And when Prabhupada would talk, just to say a few things would take maybe 45 minutes. It didn't come out like a lecture. It took a long time to get these things out. Because Prabhupada would say in little spurts he would speak. He didn't speak in like we experienced him before here. So things would happen. Maybe we could fill only a very small tape of what Prabhupada spoke in one day. But at this time, Prabhupada was talking to Sarup Damodar, and he said that there are 4 kinds of birth. There's birth from the egg, there's birth from sweat, there's birth from the womb, and there's birth from the seed. He said, so there's 4 kinds of birth, but scientists are saying that life is coming from a combinations of chemicals. But Prabhupada is saying they're coming in 4 ways, through seeds, through sweat, through the womb, and through eggs. Life is coming from life, he pressed this point. He said, the scientists, he said, cannot understand Bhagavad Gita. He said, the scientists cannot understand the verse from Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nakam Sati Nakom Sati. He says, they cannot understand that the Brahma Bhuta person, he's self-realized, he's experiencing happiness from within. Even his body is completely destroyed. He is in ecstasy, he said. And then he said, I am that Brahma Bhuta person. That's the last words Prabhupada said to us when he was speaking to us. I am that Brahma Bhuta person. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, that was a very nice darshan, Srila Prabhupada. It's getting late. We don't overexert yourself. And he asked us all to leave. Now, I talked with Sarup Damodar Maharaj. He said he stayed on a long time with Prabhupada that night. But that's the last thing I heard Prabhupada say. So the next day, he went into Mahasamadhi. And the Kavi Raj had told us that Srila Prabhupada was going to leave his body at sunset. So I walked out of the room, say, from Mangalarti to maybe 1 o'clock, I was in the room. And we were crying, and at this time, all the ladies were allowed in, everyone was allowed in, the room was packed, it was hot, it was stuffy. We were chanting, Bhadabara was filming, you've seen the film where they're all standing around. So about 1 o'clock, I walked out of the room, and Gopal Krishnan came up to me and said, Pita, he said, we have to dig Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi tomb. They said that it hasn't been dug yet. They said, can you do that? He says, I'll go get you a shovel. I said, okay, I can do it. I can do that. Because Gopal Krishna Maharaj was in charge of the devotees from Bombay, and I was Garga Muni's library party, so I was under his control, always. Such a sweet devotee, Gopal Krishna. A lot of people don't know that, but he is. So they went, and he gave me the shovel. So I went to the place where the Samadhi was, and I was to be, and I stuck the shovel in the sand. And I tell you, it was easy. It was like digging a hole in the beach. It wasn't like it took effort to dig a hole in the beach, because Raman Reddy is just all sand. So I started digging holes, and I was digging for about 3 minutes, and I'm thinking, this means I believe Prabhupada's going to leave. I'm digging this hole. That means I'm accepting Prabhupada's going to die. I'm accepting that Prabhupada's going to leave his body, and I'm digging his grave. I'm digging Srila Prabhupada's grave. I can't do this. Prabhupada's not going to leave. Prabhupada's not going to leave. I can't dig his grave. And this one devotee said to me, I can. It was Kripa Nidhi, a Latino devotee from the New Dwarka, and he grabbed and he dug the whole Samadhi. It was like 10 feet square, 10 feet deep. They dug the Samadhi. And so then I went back into Srila Prabhupada's room, and I stayed into Srila Prabhupada's room until almost the sunset. So around 5 o'clock again, Prabhupada's going to leave, like 6:23, we know now. But about 5 o'clock, maybe 5:30, I just get into this mood, from the same mood I had when I was digging, that Prabhupada's not going to leave. This is just a Leela. He's not going to leave. No, I denied it. I said, I can't. This is just a Leela. Everyone's so serious. Prabhupada's going to come out of this. So I walked out of the room and I said, Prabhupada's going to come out of this. Then Gopal Krishna came up to me and said, Pita, we don't have any cloth to bury Srila Prabhupada. Will you go buy the cloth? Loy Bazaar is about to close. This is true. I can believe it. This is really what happened. These things happened to me. I could not forget them. This is how I can't forget. I remember these in sections, and I remember them for 30 years. And that's how I've been connected to Prabhupada. I spent like 22 years in China remembering these things. So I got on a rickshaw, and Gopal says, and then after you get the cloth, I want you to go to Bankir Bihari Temple and meet Abhinandan, because he's bringing flowers. And then I want you to both come back here, and bring them back. So I got on the rickshaw, and I went to Loy Bazaar. And as I'm entering Loy Bazaar, Krishnadas Babaji, who's walking, this devotee walks everywhere. He doesn't take rickshaw. He doesn't take car. He's 80-year-old Babaji, and he's walking with a stick. He's walking to Srila Prabhupada, to Krishna Balaram from Loy Bazaar, and he sees me entering Loy Bazaar, and he looks at me like, your spiritual master is leaving, and you're going to go shopping? And he gives me this really dirty look, and I realize what he's thinking, and I thought, doesn't matter. Maharaj can think that I'm going out and drinking limkas while Prabhupada's getting ready to leave his body. I know what I'm sitting here to do. So I went down the end of the bazaar, and they were all closed except there was one cloth shop open. It was at the very end and to the left, near there had this drink stand. And I went in and I said, I need to get silk dhoti for Srila Prabhupada. It has to be silk. Cannot be cotton. It has to be silk. This is for Prabhupada. Can you understand? He said, yes, Prabhupada, I understand. And he handed me a dhoti. He said, this is silk. So I took it. I brought it. Went to Bankir Bihari Temple to meet Abhinandan. He had big sheets filled with marigolds. And as we're helping him put them in the rickshaw, this old widow, she comes up to me and she starts grabbing my arm, and I'm wearing saffron cloth. No women touch you, especially sadhu ladies touch you if you're like this. This is a saint. She comes up, she starts grabbing my arms. She says, Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. That was the actual moment Prabhupada was leaving the planet. Because by the time we had gotten to the temple, Prabhupada was on palanquin, and they were circumambulating Srila Prabhupada's body around the temple. And then we brought Srila Prabhupada's lotus body inside and showed him to Krishna Balaram, to Gaurnitai, Shishi Krishna Balaram, and Shishi Radha Krishna. And then Narayan Maharaj told us to put Prabhupada's body on the Vyasa-san. And then me and Bhaktisiddhanta, we were able to fan in Yushchamra and many devotees, but I remember me and Bhaktisiddhanta fanned Srila Prabhupada that night, very long time, and Narayan Maharaj said, we will not sleep tonight, we will not leave Srila Prabhupada alone, and we will have kirtan for him. So we had Artik, and we sang the Shri Guru Charana Padma prayers, and then we had a kirtan, mostly led by Narayan Maharaj and Krishnadas Babaji, and all the devotees all night long until the sun rose. And when the sun rose, Prabhupada's body was put in the middle of the temple in the little courtyard, and Srila Prabhupada's sister came, and she poured water in Prabhupada's mouth. And then we took Srila Prabhupada's body on Pirkram of all the 6 Goswamis' temples. And all the residents of Vrindavan placed flower garlands on Prabhupada's body. And then we came back to Krishna Balaram, and Srila Prabhupada's body was bathed. They placed a new cloth on, and he was placed inside the Samadhi, and the bottom of the Samadhi was very white, beautiful white marble, flat white marble, and Srila Prabhupada was put in a lotus position. Narayan Maharaj and Bhakti Charu and a few other devotees were inside the hole, and they brought salt, and they started to bring salt in, and we saw as the salt went up, 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 and then over Prabhupada's head, and then disappear, and then cover, and then the whole thing over, and then everyone leave, and then they just put a little altar there, and with Prabhupada's picture, and they say, Narayan Maharaj says, from now we have artiks here, just artiks in the temple. And Prabhupada gets offering, just like we offer the deities, same time. So I sat out there and just sat there by the spot, like a little dog who didn't know what to leave, where to go now. What does he do? Also, there was some very nice devotee. He came up to me, he said, my father took pictures of Srila Prabhupada at the time of Samadhi, and he wants to give to all of Prabhupada's disciples this picture. Will you please come to my house and get from my father your picture? So I went to the man's house, and he told me that he had a picture of Srila Prabhupada, and he gave me a picture of Prabhupada at Samadhi, and I still have it in my Srimad Bhagavatam in China. It's like the last thing that I have. And he looked at my palm. He said he was a palmist. He wanted to look at my palm. And he looked at my palm, and I said, what do you see? He says, I see the palm of someone who has a very strong spiritual master. That's what he said. I said, anything else? He says, that's all I see. Someone who has a very strong spiritual master. That's what he told me. I remember one point Prabhupada said that he had always prayed his whole life. Now, can you imagine such a thing? He had always prayed his whole life to be able to give up eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Can you imagine praying to Krishna, dear Krishna, please let me give up eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Prabhupada said, I have always prayed my whole life to Krishna to give up eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. He said, now I've given up the defending and the mating, and by this disease, I've also given up the eating and the sleeping. So Krishna has finally answered my prayer. You know, and then he says, and now the smell is going. The sense of smell is gone. So that means death will come soon. He said, because When the smell goes, then death comes soon, when you cannot smell anymore. But, can you imagine, to pray to Krishna, to give up these things? So this Prabhupada saying, he was telling us, he was revealing to us his true nature. He is completely free from eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. The eating and the sleeping part is a little hard to give up, And he did. So he said that's what he always prayed Krishna to release him from, and he finally gave it. He was finally able to be released from that. Karuna Prachu